I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. And this is the I Hate Politics candidate interviews with Ibrahima Baba Cissé and Arvin Kim for student member of the Montgomery County Board of Education. I'm Sunil Dasgupta, host of I Hate Politics. If you are new to the show, I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse, democratic, and sometimes divided societies. As part of the show, we have conversations with local, state, and sometimes federal candidates. Rather than ask them how they stand on a multitude of issues, these conversations try to get to the character of the candidate. For this week's interviews, my guests are not the usual political candidates for whom you can vote for in the upcoming primary, but rather two high school students running to be student member of the Board of Education in Montgomery County, Maryland. The SMOB, as the position is known, is one of the 8 members of the county school board and selected by secondary students in the county. That is, all MCPS students in 6th grade and up get to vote. The last several years have seen a string of very strong SMOBs who have pushed hard on equity, mental health, and other matters important to students. Not all school boards around the country or even in Maryland have student members, and even when they have them, they may not have full voting authority. In Montgomery County, they are almost co-equal with other regularly elected school board members, except they cannot vote on personnel matters. Rising student activism has led many to question the role and power of the SMOB. In neighboring Howard County, which has very similar arrangement for SMOBs as Montgomery, some parents and residents question the constitutionality of a minor student who cannot vote in the general elections, nevertheless being allowed to exercise general government function, including being able to vote on spending decisions made by the school board. The lawsuit by these parents was defeated in lower courts and has made its way to the Maryland Court of Appeals, the state's Supreme Court. What the lower court decision said on the constitutionality argument is worth noting. To the argument that a student member could not hold elected public office because only those who are allowed to vote and over the age of 18 can do so, the judgment offered a dramatically different take. The court said that the so-called election of student members was not really an election, but rather a special appointment process. First, the statute provides that other members of the Board of Education appoint the student member based on certain selection practices, which could include secondary students getting together to choose one of themselves. Second, if the winner of this so-called election process was somehow not able to serve as the student member, the school board could appoint the runner-up. Filling vacancies usually involves separate election process or an appointment process. For these and other reasons, the court held that the SMOB position was in fact not a violation of the Constitution. The judgment of the Court of Appeals is yet to come, so there could be more twists and turns. Meanwhile, Baba Cissé and Arvin Kim, the two candidates for SMOB in Montgomery County in 2022, are running campaigns as if this were an election. The SMOB election is April 20th. Please be sure to share this episode with any secondary student in MCPS you might know. Music for this episode comes from Emily Hall, a DC singer-songwriter who grew up in Whitman. You can find her on Instagram at Songs by Emily Hall.
That leads us astray. Oh, I still believe in love today. No war that is fought can never be won. So lay down your weapons and throw out your guns. And don't be confused between what's black or white. Compassion's most powerful when we unite. 'Cause I believe in love, sweet love. May the power of people rise above all the hatred and anger that leads us astray.
Baba Cissé, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Hello, Sunil. It's nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me to come speak with you.
You're running to be the next student member of the board of Montgomery County Board of Education. Start with, if you don't mind, telling us a little bit about yourself, where you go to school, what courses you take, what do you want to do?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. So my name is Baba Cissé, as you guys already know. I go to Albert Einstein High School. I'm a current junior there. So some of the courses that I take at my school, I'm in the IB diploma program, and so all of my classes are IB classes, except for my math class, which is a pre-calc class. But my IB math class will be taken next year. But so it's a very rigorous program, but I do recommend it for any students who really want to have a challenge and are really motivated to take their education to a next level while in high school, to take the IB program. A little bit more about me. I love reading a lot. I do. I love watching movies. I love watching TV shows. I haven't been able to catch up on any movies or shows right now because I'm very, very busy. But I love going out and running. I play a lot of sports. I play soccer. I play basketball. I run cross country and track. That's my favorite sports. I do love cooking. It started during the pandemic. I didn't have anything else to do at home, so I just took out a pot and just started making food, and it's something that I've just been doing for a while now. Yeah, that's just a little bit more about me.
Okay. So what do you like to read?
My favorite book right now has to be this book called Dune. It's been out for a while, but my friend, he suggested it to me, and I just started reading, and it's just amazing.
Have you seen the movie?
The movie was magnificent.
All right. Okay. And what do you like to cook?
My favorite food to cook is this. It's this dish from my country. I'm from Mali, by the way, so it's called a chicken, and it's a lot of vegetables. It's rice, a side of fish. It's really amazing. My whole family loves it.
Okay. Any particular spice you use in there?
Not really. It's just the regular ones. I can't even name all of them. I don't even read the name. I'm just like, oh, this is the red one. Let me put this in.
Thank you for that. What do you think are the issues that are important to students right now?
Issues that are important to students right now, I would say, is student mental health is at the forefront, as well as COVID relief and student representation. Because one, on mental health, we've seen with current events that happened with Magruder High School, we've seen, and with the pandemic, we've seen that MCPS is rising to have a more structured approach towards our student mental health. But it should not have taken the global pandemic. It should not have taken incidents that happened at Magruder for the county to see that our students struggle with our mental health. We've been struggling for years. The second thing on student representation, we have the most diverse county, over 160,000 students, more than half of them being minority students. We don't have the same access to education, access to opportunities. There exists an opportunity gap, an achievement gap. where your quality of education is based off of where you live. And I see that as something that we've seen that progress. It's been around 5 years now. We've had the same issue, but there's nothing being done about it. We don't get the same feedback. We don't have parents of minority students. We don't have even minority students themselves educated on what these things are, how they're being poorly represented in the grand scheme that is the county.
So in terms of mental health, what are the things that you would like to see?
The new budget for next year is going to fund a lot of SROs and the new CEO 2.0 model. And this model, there's a bunch of funding that goes towards that model, where instead we could reiterate that money and reinvest that money that goes towards hiring things like school psychologists, building on school wellness centers. Every school should have a wellness center. Most schools do, but students don't even know that they're there. They don't have the resources to really reach out to students. So I want to make sure that the school wellness centers are well funded, that more funding goes into hiring mental health professionals. I know there's currently one therapist per cluster, but we need to increase the amount of that so that students are able to talk to somebody when they need it. And then another thing I want to see is, this is something brand new, but a mental health screening tool. What this would look like is a Google form that would be totally confidential, where students are able to fill it out. And on the questionnaire, they'll be able to, the question would be, how are you feeling today? How did you feel this week? Is there anything you'd like to talk about to a counselor? Do you know who your counselor is? Does your counselor do a job at reaching out to you to discuss problems you may have? Do you have somebody in the building who you are able to talk to on a one-to-one basis? Things like that, just because I know that students really struggle with this. Me, myself, being somebody who struggles with their mental health, I want to make sure that students don't have the same, students around the county don't have the same experiences I have, and the majority of the students have faced it.
Are you asking for this kind of questionnaire to be done every week, every month? I would imagine if you ask students repeatedly about how, of these questions, they'll stop taking it seriously.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I know when things get too repetitive, we don't want to pay attention. So having it done bi-weekly, having it done weekly, I don't think there would be an issue. Instead, I think the benefits outweigh the fallout. So running for SMOB is one of the most stressful things that I've done. Being on a varsity track team, varsity cross country team, being in the IB diploma program, having many responsibilities at home, taking care of siblings, taking care of things around the house, and then biking to all my different schools. That really plays a very heavy toll on my mental and physical health. At the end of the day, I'm left feeling drained. Sometimes it's just a bit too much for one 17-year-old to take on his own. And so that's something I struggled with. I'm just finding some time to really focus on myself, focusing on what really is important to me, just making sure that I'm okay, making sure that I still find time to talk to my friends, talk to my family, things like that. And so I just want more students to have the opportunity to learn more. And especially for minority students, I know there's a stigma that is you don't talk about mental health at your home. I know that's something that I'm trying to educate more students on, that it's okay to not feel okay, and that it's okay if you want to talk to somebody, and it's okay even if you're not feeling well. There are different ways in which you can relieve stress. You can play sports, go for a walk, talk to your friends, talk to a teacher, things like that. I just want there to be more freedom, more examples for students to be able to get the help for mental health that they truly need.
You make the argument that you need to have downtime in your life. And this is very important. But having downtime means that you have to pick and choose what you do. And you in particular have a very full plate. So how do you argue to students that they should in fact do less and not more? And are we trying to make public policy for something that students are ultimately responsible for, how much they do?
So it's less like setting up a public policy that's just entitled for the students, because the way it works right now is 5 minutes off of every class and so that you have an extra period in one of your class periods. And in that time, that space is county created and time left for the students to really wind down, go through a mental health lesson first. Even if that lesson is like just a 5-minute video or just a 5-minute lesson, after that video, after that mental health lesson, you are free to do what you want. And so I would say it's not being left up to the students. It's not creating a space where students are totally doing less. It's more so that students are able to wind down, de-stress before moving on to the next lesson. And I feel that that's something that's really important for students.
But that is happening, right? Or do you see that some schools don't have it, some schools have it? What is your experience with that?
At my school, we have it. The majority of schools don't have it.
Let's talk about student representation, which is something that you mentioned. And you tied student representation to the idea of opportunity gap. What are some practical things that we can do from a student's perspective to narrow this gap?
The main priority, especially for somebody who's in the position of being the student member of the board, is really working with students and making a coalition of students who are involved. And one of my new goals this year was to create an inter-school communication plan, because I want there to be the SGAs, organization leaders, in one space. This could either be a Discord server, a Slack server, where we're able to communicate ideas. Look what Wheaton High School is doing. Look at what their SGA is doing. How are they raising that participation? Having inter-school events. My school, last year, we coordinated an event with Wheaton High School, and which we've just seen a spike in participation.
What event was it?
It was a Spirit Week challenge. So it was virtual. So you dressed up in whatever the Spirit Day was, and then they submit pictures to us, and we've gotten over 400 submissions through that. And them too, they saw their numbers rise exponentially. That I want there to be a community sense in this election, in this campaign. I want there to be more of that sense where we are all working together to create what we really want, because it really is the student voice that reaches out and makes change in the county. There's nothing else that does. It's our experiences, it's our ideas, it's our thoughts that really influence board decisions, board members, because they aren't at our schools. They don't feel what we feel. And so they need to hear our experience.
I've heard that in order to be SMOB, you have to start to develop networks pretty early on in middle school. And if you haven't done this by middle school, then the chances of you actually having a network to be able to mount a serious campaign for SMOB just goes away. Do you see a difference between somebody that starts in middle school networking and getting these leadership opportunities and somebody who, say, starts in 10th grade?
I definitely see the difference. And I am disappointed that there is that difference too. If you've seen for the past 18 years, the SMOB has come from the same organization, which is MCR SGA, Montgomery County Regional SGA. For the past 18 years, every single SMOB has been affiliated or been part of that organization. And they were able to start their advocacy journey way earlier because they had access to those organizations. And that is a fact, and that's something that we know and every student knows, and that's what has been pushed onto us. And that is why we see a lot of students say that they aren't able to get into these opportunities because they are not in set organizations. And having that mentality is truly false. Being somebody who's applied to MCR, when I found out about it in 9th grade, I never heard back from them. I've applied a total of 4 times because I saw that I wanted to take my advocacy to a next step. And I saw that Will was joining this organization and showing my ideas and sharing what I believe is what happens in my cluster. And me being denied that, I knew that I'm gonna have to find a new way to get involved. I ran for SMOB because I saw that disparity and I saw that happening, and I'm trying to get every student to know that is false. That is not true. That SMOB is open to all students, but it's just been centralized by those organizations for a long, long time. And it's time for that to end. It's time for that for students to realize that it depends on you. I want students to know that you don't have to come from a long-standing history of student advocacy. All you have to do is start somewhere. Start with your idea, start with your goal, and fight for it. Have the determination to stick to what you believe in and follow through with it. And I hope that I've shown students that that is what you really need. And I've really shown organizations that they should be more open, more inclusive, because we do have a say. We do have a voice. And it does not matter whether we started in 9th grade or whether we started in 7th grade, that we are able to fight for the same things.
Okay. Let's talk about COVID relief, which is the third thing you mentioned when you started as an issue that students were interested in. When you say COVID relief for student, or from the perspective of students, what is it that you mean?
Okay, so COVID relief has affected us in many, many different ways. And so what that looks like, having more, because we are in the 21st century of education. We have things like Zoom available to us now. So we need to use that to its fullest extent. Right now, there's over 3,000 students currently enrolled in the virtual academy, and over 1,000 students in the waiting list to get onto the virtual academy. What I want to do is go and look into hiring more teachers that can work in the virtual environment so that we are able to offer more classes, more opportunities for students who want to take a class that is not offered at their school, who want to take a program that is not offered at their school, but is far away from them, to take it on a virtual setting and still be currently enrolled at their school. I want there to be more opportunities, more easy access to things like that, and there to be a hybrid model to learning going forward. Like last year, you had the choice of whether you wanted to go in school or stay at home and virtually learn. And then looking into things like getting more COVID tests. I know they're very expensive, they're high in demand, but I believe that this is something that we should go look more into, because not every student is enrolled in the mass testing program. Updating HVAC system, having more hand sanitizing stations, even posted outside of classrooms. And COVID relief goes into mental health as well, because COVID has affected returning into in-person after a long year of that disconnect with our interaction has affected mental health of many students. And so those are the things that really go into COVID relief. And those are the things that are in my COVID relief plans for this year.
You said you want to hire more teachers. We know that there is a national and even a local teacher shortage. Teachers are leaving. In this environment, it's going to be very, very hard to find all the teachers that we need to hire.
So I want to share with you from one of the organizations that I was in, we talked about this very same issue, but we talked about how can we get more students to want to be teachers, more students to know what teachers do, more teachers to want to stay in the profession, because most of these teachers who leave, they get hired into more administration, more into the main central office job positions. Hey, that's amazing, but we want to let teachers know that being a teacher is really cool and really amazing. And so one of the things that it looks like is hiring teachers of diverse backgrounds.
The question is how? I mean, how do you tell a smart Latino kid or a smart African-American kid, hey, listen, go join teaching? But obviously every teacher, is stressed. There's a contradiction there. And you can obviously have young people want to become more teachers, but that's a long-term proposition, right? So by the time you graduate from high school and then finish college, get your teaching certificate, that's, 5-6 years. And so, I think the problem is here and now. Do you have a sense what students would like to see? Would they like to see more smaller classes? How would they distribute the teaching resources? How would teaching need to change essentially in order for you to get what you want?
I don't necessarily think it's the way of changing the way that teaching operates, because I believe that MCPS has one of the largest counties, one of the most diverse counties. Having more teachers that's something that is recognized on the national level. One of my policy goals was to create a new teacher initiative. And that initiative, what it looked like was offering free and affordable childcare for our teachers' children. So it's not a full-fledged plan, but it's something that was it is a plan, but it's not something that is like into fruition. That is not something that is like very based off of, but that was just an idea that I had that would be more incentive for teachers who are looking to work here, to want to work here. And teachers who are currently enrolled, it was just working to relieving some of that stress that they had. And so that was one of my goals, and that is something that I'm continuing to looking into researching every aspect of it so I can make a plan and bring it forward to the board. Yeah.
Okay. You're writing a IB TOK, Theory of Knowledge essay as part of your IB diploma?
Yes.
What is it?
The topic is what were the ramifications of the Haitian Revolution onto other revolutions, or how did the Haitian Revolution inspire other revolutions to happen?
Baba Cissé, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics. Good luck in the campaign.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Still love you the same when you push love away. Still love you the same come sunshine or rain. I still love you the same. 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 I am you and you are me. We are safe.
That was Albert Einstein High School Junior Baba Cissé. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with Walt Whitman High School Junior Arvin Kim.
Voices as we sing. Hear our voices as we sing. Heal our voices as we sing.
Arvin Kim, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to kind of talk about all these policy areas around education.
Let's start with a short biography of yourself. Who are you, where you come from in terms of, which part of the county and, where you grew up, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Arvin Kim. I'm one of the two finalists for the student member of the board election here in Montgomery County. I'm a junior from Whitman High School. I've been in this cluster since the second grade. I've stuck in the same neighborhood all my life, gone through the same school clusters, and engaged with advocacy and educational policy at the county, a little bit at the state, but definitely predominantly at the county level with the Board of Education and the County Council in Montgomery County. I really got involved at that scale or at that scope. I think around middle school is the best kind of time frame to place it at. Really around 5 years ago, I got involved in student government organizations, countywide student government organizations, like the Montgomery County Junior Council, the Montgomery County Regional Student Government Association, these countywide bodies that seek to represent the students of MCPS to the Board of Education.
What are things that you like to do?
A lot of my free time, which now seems to be limited, but when I do get a chance to have free time, I really enjoy music. I try to learn as many new instruments as I can. Starting from elementary school through MCPS's instrumental music program, I started playing the saxophone when I was young and still do that.
Are you in a jazz band?
Yes, I'm in my school's jazz ensemble that meets every day like another class. And then I play in smaller groups just with my friends at school as well.
What are you hearing from students about issues that are most important to them?
Mental health support, I think, is a big priority for the students of Montgomery County. Some of the stories or more specific concerns I've heard revolve around the lack of mental health professionals working in MCPS buildings. Even at the middle school level, I've heard stories of students having to wait and essentially wait lists of who gets the chance to meet with their school psychologist, or really being only able to connect with a mental health professional 2 days a week.
Anything else?
Yeah, the cafeterias are running out of lunches that they can supply for students before every student gets to get a meal. And when you take that into consideration, and also the fact that for a large amount of students in our county, this is one of their more consistent access to nutrition, that's a big concern.
Do you think you want to add something from your end as important?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a little more variable in terms of who you get the chance to speak to. But as a whole, I think one of the more pressing issues in public education, really, not just within the scope of MCPS, but really nationwide, is disparities in opportunities that public education systems can provide students. And this really touches on every level of the resources provided to students. And just generally, the most common way I see this come up is through school infrastructure or just general lack of resources that students feel. And this is definitely more concentrated in more underserved parts of the counties or specific schools where you hear concerns of students, again, primarily with crumbling infrastructure or school buildings that are falling apart. Some of the horror stories that I've heard include ceilings from classrooms just falling down, or water fountains being ripped off the walls, and all these infrastructure concerns that a lot of students seem to really be concerned about, and reflects the maybe disparity in the funding and the renovations that our county can provide these schools.
So the Whitman cluster, where you have spent most of your life, usually has not had any, these issues about, lack of funding or infrastructure. In fact, we know that the schools in County Council District 1 have been disproportionately have benefited from county funds. So as somebody that goes to Whitman cluster, do you think you are the right representative to push for changes in disparity?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question, and a very important factor to keep in mind in any area of public policy, I think. But I think to kind of address this concern that's very universal, definitely not specific to me or specific to this election or this year, of how one person, regardless of where they come from, can really accurately represent a populace that is 160,000 students large. And I think really no matter who you are, that's a difficult task. And, absolutely, I recognize that I don't look like every student in Montgomery County, and I don't necessarily share the same experience as every student in Montgomery County. But, getting involved in advocacy and learning about what makes our county work and the areas that it doesn't, from a young age, has really been informative. And the biggest takeaway that I have is that this work, as difficult or as big of a task as it might seem, can be done with the collective work, drive, and passion of students from every school and every grade and every cluster. So, again, recognizing that my experience might not reflect that of every student, I want to make sure that in this role, and as I move forward, even outside of this role as an advocate for the student voice, that I'm working with students who can help me in that daunting task of representing such a diverse and large group of people.
I talked about the SMOB race in my house, and what I was told is that unless someone starts the process of running for SMOB or networking in middle school, which you did, there is not much of a chance of being able to mount an effective SMOB campaign after that, once you're in high school.
I'm a firm believer in the democratic process, and in Montgomery County, there's 88,000 eligible voters, grades 6 through 12 at every school, which I think is amazing and so great that our county is able to have the facilities to hold such a widespread election. And I'm a firm believer in that process, and that the students choose who they think is the best advocate for their voice. And should that be students who are more involved from a younger age, or some might say have more experience or maybe more prepared for the role, or familiar with the work of the Board of Education. If that be a trend, or if that be what the students of Montgomery County, those 88,000 students, see fit, then I believe in the choice of the students and the voice of the students in this wonderful process that we know as democracy.
Yeah, but you're essentially saying that 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-olds must decide what they're going to do 4 or 5 years later. And that as a 14, 15-year-old, it becomes really hard to do. And should the process be more open? One of the things that your opponent, Baba Cissé, said was that if you look at, 18 years of SMOBs, they all come from the MCRSGA, which is the Student Government Association, the Countywide Student Government Association. Is that an access issue as well?
I think that the bigger issue is just making sure that countywide organizations and opportunities for student engagement are accessible from a young age. And again, I don't think that you necessarily have to be thinking about this from those young ages. If you have a few years of experience ahead or are more aware of the process a few years ahead of time, that may be advantageous. And I think the solution to that is just making sure that the opportunity for engagement and advocacy at the countywide and statewide levels is accessible.
Talking about Whitman, the school SGA sponsored, there's a school SGA sponsored event that was recently canceled. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's called Vikathon, and because our mascot is the Viking. And the event really was a school dance, and all the students would be in the gym after this article came out with a story of sexual harassment and sexual assault in specific. I think that's when the SGA and school administration made the call to really shut it down. And that was obviously, I think, the tipping point, which makes complete sense because it is very different from consensual activity. And it definitely played a big role in the closure. Also, given the fact that even prior to the article coming out with the consensual activity, it's still kind of an uneasy area or a topic of ambiguity in terms of what the school should do to support or go against the event.
This event's been going on for a long time, right?
Yeah, I'm not super informed about the specifics, but one insight that I can add is that the previous event was called Brave. And this is actually not the first time that there's been a call for cancellation, or what ended up happening was kind of a restructure, rebrand from Brave to Vikathon. And Brave, the issue was more so than any of this. The issue was substance abuse that seemed to be widespread amongst students at the event. So their strategy was to rebrand and reapproach and implement more security measures. Again, I only know all this after reading the article, but it seems like it has been going on for a while in one form or another.
And you all raised a lot of money from this event, right? The SGA did, the school SGA?
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I think the event raised $20,000 the last time it was held in just the one for charity. Okay,
let's get back to the issues you raised. So the first time I met you, I remember it was January of 2019, and you were speaking at the mental health forum that I used to organize before COVID. And that time too, I believe you said something like, this is a huge problem. So, mental health and student mental health has been a long-standing, persistent problem, not just COVID, but even prior to COVID. Do you have a sense of why there is this persistence of not dealing with it? Do you think it has to do with not listening to students?
Yeah, I recently had the chance to speak and provide public comment at the board meeting around the operating budget for the next year. And what I went there to talk about was this very issue of mental health support and the hiring of social workers to work in Montgomery County, the apparent shortage that we see, and how that all ties into the efforts that the county has made. And when you look at it, the current situation that we see, there's just around 100 school psychologists currently employed in MCPS, and over 200 schools and over 160,000 students. And this is obviously in no way adequate to support such a large group of people, such a large group of students. And there are several schools one middle school, which is actually the middle school I attended, and a handful of elementary schools that are not currently assigned a school psychologist. So large populations of students going completely unserved. And I was able to voice this concern that I've heard so many students have to the Board of Education, and also tried my best to learn about why this is the case, and why, despite this being such a prominent issue, there's no apparent solution that has been brought to our county. Two parts of it are really, I think, come from, number one, making sure that we are allocating the budget to hire school psychologists, and making sure that this isn't just the minimum amount we can really add to our budget, or we can allocate from our budget, but we're incentivizing people to come work for Montgomery County and serve our students with budgets, with salaries that MCPS provides them, that would incentivize them to do so. Because again, with the apparent shortage that we're facing, it doesn't mean we can leave students unsupported.
If you were to win, or perhaps even if you did not win, have you thought about what you might do beyond the usual stuff that, has been done for several years, asking and petitioning and all of that, to get more mental health support? I'm thinking about, are you thinking about doing anything non-traditional, or are you going to work within the board and sit in long meetings and demand and perhaps not get?
One of the great things that's already kind of in the works is the new telehealth part of our budget that's being allocated to provide mental health support for our students. I think that's a fantastic thing that our county should definitely invest more in and expand and make sure that comes to fruition for our students. And I think that's one way that we can absolutely do that. We're going to see changes in the next year or so regarding the health curriculum, as it's a requirement expanded from one semester to a full year for high school students, making sure that as we form that curriculum, we're providing adequate education about mental health awareness and signs of struggle and resources, and making sure that we're providing online screening services. So at the bare minimum, we give students what we can, even if it's a questionnaire or something, which, in a perfect world, every student would be able to see a mental health professional as much as they need. But given the constraints we might face, at least for the time being, making sure that we can provide online resources and things that we can implement quickly.
High schoolers are notoriously derisive of surveys and especially if they are too many of them, and they will create a joke out of that. Do you think that's a viable way to do, even in the short term, what you're hoping to do? And conversely, I should also mention that the health curriculum isn't always taken seriously by students, right? I mean, I know many high school students who, want to take health on the summer because they don't have to then, sort of they deprioritize it, right? And part of the reason is that it's not a very compelling curriculum. I mean, I've seen it. So, do you think those are workable solutions?
I'm really curious to see the effects of having it as a year-long or 2-semester requirement instead of a one will have on that, and see what impact that has on, how students are taking the course and what kind of education they get from it. But even outside of the health, recognizing that we want to adapt our health curriculum, even as we do that, also implementing trainings or teachings around mental health outside of the health curriculum. I think that a trend that we see is maybe schools getting away from school assemblies or more wide or larger congregations of students as a model, and more, within our classrooms. Maybe one thing that my school has done is have virtual meetings that each teacher logs into, and then the students from each class watch from the big screen what's going on in those meetings in place of assemblies.
Let's talk about school lunches, which you brought up earlier. You said that you've heard that MCPS is running out of school lunches because in part they are providing free lunches and the uptake has increased. Have you heard from particular schools, or is this like a across the board thing?
Yeah, this is something that I haven't heard from every school, but it's not really an issue that's come up at every school. But I have heard from a number of schools, independent of me, kind of prompting it or asking about it. And then when I have asked about it to the schools after hearing it so many times from other schools, it seems like it's an issue pretty widespread. And I don't get my lunch from the school cafeteria every day. So I wouldn't know about this issue in specific and whether it takes place on my school as well. But it seems to be pretty widespread.
Another student issue, but I think of significant importance, is whether or not there should be finals in MCPS. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I've heard this come up recently, and I think it has to do with, we're unsure of what our schooling would look like during the pandemic and over the virtual year. And now that we're kind of reestablishing what our curriculums and what our year looks like, this is a question that is kind of reemerged as prominent in the space of public policy in Montgomery County. And I think where I stand on this and what I think is that the role of a school system should be to best set up students for success. And we see that finals don't necessarily always do that. And there are situations that hurt students to have that instead of supporting them. And I think generally as a trend, we want to move away as a county, as a school system, and really public education everywhere. We want to move away from testing, standardized testing, and overbearing students with this workload of tests that we currently see, and move towards more project-based learning and reevaluate how we structure our education. Seeing that finals can hurt students more than help them, even if it's just in some cases. I definitely, for that reason, don't think that it should be universally required or implemented.
Arvin Kim, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics. Good luck in the campaign.
Thank you so much.
That was Walt Whitman High School junior Arvin Kim, who's running for the SMOB position in Montgomery County, alongside Baba Cissé. You can find out more about Arvin Kim at arvinforsmob.com and follow on Twitter and Instagram at arvinforsmob. You can find Baba Cissé at baba4smob.com and follow on Twitter and Instagram at baba4smoba. That's all for this episode. If you have secondary school students eligible to vote for the SMOB position, please share the interviews with them. The SMOB election is April 20th. Music for this episode comes from DC-based singer-songwriter Emily Hall. I hope you will listen, like, and share the show as we bring you stories about politics close to you and your home. See you next time.
To live our truth. I've been trying to learn how to face the sadness. I've been trying to learn how to feel this grief. From moments of love to moments of loneliness, I surrender in gratitude for